First Baptist Church Denby for another night of Social Justice Week, our founder night. And boy, we have a real treat for you tonight as we talk about equity, justice, fairness, education reform, and maybe a few other topics. But we're so delighted to have you on those of you on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever media platform you're on tonight. Such a delight to have you back into the household again with us as we have these discussions. As we have done all week, we ask if you have questions for our panelists, for our presenters, that you would text it and put it inside in the comments section on your feed, whatever feed that is that you have. We have we have a connection with that also. Especially for those on Facebook, it's a lot easier to put your comments there, and then we have some questions to ask later. But we thank you again for being here tonight. We certainly have had a tremendous week in dealing with social issues that really impact the African American community and all communities of color. And so we thank you for tuning in. We thank you for the questions that you've been able to send through. And we do pray that this last night will be another night of challenging for you, another night that pushes you, another night that urges you to do your best and to be your best as we are all citizens of the empire. So we thank you so much again for being here. And we're going to get started with the program. I'll get started with a word of prayer, and we get started with the panelists and the presentations. I'm going to ask Minister Reverend Jamal Ingram to come with the prayer and with our scripture for the night. And it's the same scripture we've been using all week. It comes from Amos 5:21 through 24. Amen.
The word of the Lord reads, I, the Lord, hate and despise your religious celebrations and your times of worship. I won't accept your offerings or animal sacrifices, not even your very best. No more of your noisy songs. I won't listen when you play your harps, but let justice and fairness flow like a river that never runs dry. Let us pray. Most wise God, our eternal Father, we come to you this evening. God, thank you for another opportunity to come before your throne. But God, most of all, thank you for the opportunity, God, for where Christ and community meets in this sacred place. God, that we may talk about the issues, dear God, that impacts each and all of us, dear God, that we may grow thereby. God, we thank you for the presenters that are here tonight. Dear God, that they will give us information, dear God, that will feed us, dear God, that we may apply it to our daily lives. Dear God, that we may be effective in our homes and in our community. We thank you now, dear God, for what they're about to say and how it will strengthen us, build us, dear God, that we may grow even more. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. At this time, we will have our first presenter will be Dr. Shamika Gerald of Newport News Public Schools. She's the head of the Equity Assessment and Strategic Operations Department.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening and to talk about the equity work that is happening in Newport News Public Schools. As they shared, I am Dr. Shamika Gerald. I am the Director of Equity Assessment and Strategic Operations. And while that might sound like a lot of title, what really the function of our department is to monitor the implementation of our new strategic plan, Journey 2025, which has an equity lens on each of the 5 goals. And when we talk about educational equity, we talk about ensuring equitable outcomes for each learner in our school division by ensuring each student gets what they need, when they need it, so that they can thrive as a learner. Specifically, when we look at educational equity, we look at the data in our school division and use it to make decisions and inform our work. Now, this is not new work. We have been doing this work for many years. Our Student Discipline Task Force recently presented recommendations. The state celebrated our work around disproportionality in student discipline, and we are really making strides to ensuring the needs of each student is met. So I'm happy at this time to answer any questions that people may have for our real goal, and one of our goals, is to ensure that we have open lines of transparent communication with our school community, our internal and external stakeholders. So I'm happy to represent our school division in that work this evening, especially in something as important as social justice and equity and reform in the ways that we need to serve our under-resourced communities. Okay. No, I didn't have anything in particular because,
Okay. All right. Well, could you just explain to us again the program that you're involved in?
well, the department that I run, I work within the school division, is Equity Assessment and Strategic Operations, responsible for the implementation of the strategic plan. And the result of the strategic plan is our Newport News Profile of a Learner, which has 7 attributes that are aligned with the 2025 Report of Workforce. Our work has also has been aligned with the City of Newport News' strategic plan. We've conducted a crosswalk in that work to ensure that our education goals in Journey 2025 align with the city's goals for a well-educated workforce. So really the responsibility falls in the areas of identifying opportunity gaps for our learners and identifying what resources need to be put in certain areas to ensure those gaps are closed for all of our learners, to ensure equitable access to opportunities, but also equitable outcomes. So there's data analysis that is involved, program evaluation, so ensuring that there's effective implementation of programs, and looking at academic return on investment as we use finances to really ensure that the resources that are needed in schools and communities are provided.
So are you prepared to discuss the 7 attributes?
I am prepared to discuss the attributes. Is there let me pull that up. Give me 1 second. Sure, you can ask the questions. I can multitask. I used to be a high school principal, so I can do lots of things at one time. The key issues, I'm sorry, I'm just going to, baby, can you pass my cell phone? One of the key issues that we're working on right now is developing our Newport News Public Schools equity policy, which will drive the work, developing an equity plan. So what are those measurable goals and outcomes that we will be reporting out to our community on? Also developing opportunities for more transparent communication in that data through equity data walks with our community partners as well. So being very transparent in the work and using our community's input to really make determinations and help inform the work that happens within the school division. And I asked for this because I needed to get on the internet. Well, this year in particular, we've done a lot with the focus groups and forums. We just had a recent Facebook Live where we presented information on the return to school for next school year. But throughout the pandemic, our efforts, our community relations department, Michelle Price and her team are phenomenal in getting that community engagement and using different avenues and opportunities to ensure that all of our stakeholders are informed in the work. I'm sorry.
Do you have a second question? Use your mic so they can hear you.
One of the members asked, can you explain when you said equitable justice? What did you mean by that? And does it relate to the Newport News Public School system?
I don't believe I used the term equitable justice.
Equate justice, I guess that's what they're saying here in this question. Can you explain equating justice to the Newport News Public School system?
We have not said anything. wasn't talking about equating justice. What we're talking about is making sure we have equitable access to opportunities for all learners. So ensuring that students, regardless of their race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, background, zip code, have access to the same enriching, rigorous opportunities across our school division. So it shouldn't be our belief is that because of where you live, what school you attend, what you look like, does not determine what access you have to the opportunities that we have in our school division. So it's not about social justice or social change. We're talking about changing our community by ensuring students have access, because when students have access and they have a quality education, the outcome is a well-educated workforce for our Newport News community, and that in turn will lead to the change that we're all seeking in our communities. And I would have my profile of a learner pulled up right here for you. And, so you asked about the profile of a learner. So learner is an acronym that was developed by our community, actually. When we had the strategic planning committee, 45 community members were a part of this work. And we had them in a conference room, well, in the school board auditorium, and just thinking through if our strategic plan is successful, what does that look like as an outcome for a student? So we have a young man behind us today. So if we were going to take him through Newport News Public Schools, what is the expectation of an output? And so we have the 7 attributes, and then they came up with the acronym LEARNER. So it's not just a profile of a learner as a learner in our division, but this means something. So we want our students to be leaders who are confident, coachable, team builders, champions of change, respectful, and influential. So you can be a leader, but when you lead, are you leading in a way that is going to make a positive impact on our community and a positive impact on our society? And we don't just say positive without clarifying the definition of what we mean. So their attributes are listed for each of those. We also want our learners to be emotionally intelligent, and that means they're committed, they're confident, resourceful, empathetic, and focused. In addition, academically prepared. They're literate, appliers of knowledge, they're workforce-minded, digitally confident, they're going to be resilient, self-directed, and adaptive, innovators, equity-minded, and reflective. So when we say a learner, each of those letters stands for a characteristic we will see developed in our students as a result of effective implementation of our strategic plan.
So let's just go over that again. So the L I got.
The
leader,
L.
Right. And
I feel like I'm about to say, do supersonic.
Yeah.
That S is for super. No, L is for leaders,
E.
emotionally intelligent. A is academically prepared. R is resilient. N, is for innovators. It's just capital N. The other E is for equity-minded, and the R is for reflective. And this information can be found on the Newport News Public Schools website. If you go to About Newport News, you'll see Journey 2025. That is the name of the strategic plan. There's a website developed out for it, and the profile of a learner with the attributes is listed on the site, as well as all of the goals.
Okay. I didn't see anything, I guess most of this is there, but when it comes to retention, is that something you guys are striving for as well?
Retention of what?
Retention of students, making sure they in-school system engaged and making sure they follow through on these 7 attributes that you have.
Yes, sir. They're all.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of dropouts in high school and other things like that. And so once you get somebody into the cycle and then they drop out of the cycle, I mean, how does that affect the outcome of what you're trying to get?
Well, I think at the beginning of this school year, the Virginia Pilot and Virginia Department of Education highlighted Newport News Public Schools for having one of the lowest dropout rates in our region and highest graduation rates. So the work that we're doing, as we talk about the new strategic plan, it is not reinventing, fixing something that's broken. It's how do we extend upon the successes we're already seeing in our school division. So our strategic plan is about being transformative. And so how do we move the workforce so that we're better better at 2025 than we were in 2020 when we started the strategic plans development. So Newport News Public Schools has been celebrated for their work around retention and graduation rates for learners. Especially, I got a question recently just talking about the demographics of the learners, and there are not equity gaps in those areas. We've done that work. The state has reported out on that. So we are graduating our students in our school division.
Good. That's awesome. You got questions coming up on the social media. We're gonna get them to you as quick as we can get them.
That's all right.
You have one? What is it? Let's see.
Ma'am, can you repeat the question to the people in the audience?
Absolutely.
How are students selected to participate in this program? Or is it a program or it's not a program?
It's not a program.
Right. Just what y'all
So the
doing
question was,
consistently.
how are students selected to be in the profile of a learner? There is not a selection process. That is the profile for a Newport News learner. So it doesn't matter if you're in pre-K or a senior or a student who is returning because you had some type of challenges. It is for every student that we put these structures in place that you get what you need when you need it, so that you have those attributes so that you can contribute upon graduation.
So there's no targeted students or audience you're trying to connect?
Yeah, the target is
Everybody.
each student.
Yeah, everybody.
Each student.
Yeah,
And I'm big on language, so I don't ever use the term all students, because you could very easily blanket that. You could say all black students, all white students, all students with disabilities, all multilingual learners. But it's about what each student needs, because there's an intersectionality that occurs. So I am a mixed race woman. I am black and I am white. But I also have a disability. I have ADHD. So I am multiple things. So you can't say all black girls, because I don't fit all black girls. We're not all the same. So we are addressing not all, but what each student needs, trying to do that on a more individualized basis to ensure that they have what they need. So a personalized learning experience that really is driven through students' desires and what they want to be, which will further engage them in school. I was not the best student. I was not connected to school because I didn't see the value in it. But when you change it and shift it so that the student sees this is applicable to where I want to go, then you get engagement with students in a different way.
That's a nice approach to education, if it works.
It works. I'm gonna tell you, it works. And there are some really, really telling examples of how that works with students across, not just in Newport News. There's research across the nation that shows when you are focused on student outcomes based on what individual students need, there is an acceleration in the target, which is we want college career citizen ready. What does learner mean? It means we're producing well-educated, well-rounded citizens, constituency for Newport News that can support the work that is happening in our city, the development, the shipyard, the technology. Our career and technical education programs provide students with industry certifications, credentials that they can walk out of the door with and make more money than me, probably. A lot of times we've had students in those situations where they get credentials that we provide them with, but that was because they were engaged in a path that spoke to their inner mission. And so when you have these opportunities, whether it's music, because we're not saying you only go to college, if it's music, if it's the armed forces, how are we preparing students to enter any arena and be well equipped in that work? That's what our strategic plan is about, and our profile of a learner. Don't forget, y'all got other people to speak tonight too, so.
Well, we're here for a while.
Oh.
We ain't no hurry.
We have,
We're more interested in information than
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, we have another question from one of the members. It says, there's a high percentage of black and brown students in Newport News Public Schools. Has there been an initiative to increase hiring teachers of color?
Yes, that is part of our strategic plan under Goal 4, which identifies the human resources and how we use our human resource department to recruit and retain highly qualified, diverse teaching staff. There is research around students who have teachers that look like them in their performance. In addition, though, when we look at the demographics, and I'm glad someone brought that point up, when you look at the demographics of Newport News Public Schools as compared to the state, and you know, we like to get compared to other school divisions that are right next door to us, our demographics do not speak to similarities in those ways. Our demographics speak similarities more along the lines of Norfolk Public Schools because of the size, or a Richmond City Schools. Those demographics, with 54% of our students being African American or Black, with that, it mirrors other school divisions. We're not, and not to speak ill of any other school divisions, but we cannot be compared to Williamsburg, James City County, because we do not match them in size and in demographics. But when we start thinking about demographics for our school division, yes, we have 54% of our students that are Black. The state has 54-ish. Don't quote me on that number. I didn't pull the tables up. It may have changed, because I know somebody was like, it's not, it says 56.47. It's around about that number. Where at the state, when they look at the state demographic, it's 54% white. So it's almost an exact juxtaposition. So what are we doing differently? We're working our strategic plan, which has an equity lens on it, because we realize that in order to serve our learners, we need to be focused on the individual outcomes. And how do we ensure that? We focus on students' strengths and cultivate their strengths, and then we prepare them for their next step so that they can be the pastor of the church. They can be the barber. They can be the next fashion stylist. They can do all of these amazing things that we see in them as little seeds. Like, we look at you and say, you have a gift and a talent. Now, whether you use the gift and talent, your superpowers for good or evil, that's up to you. It's our job to help cultivate that in them and show them. We don't empower them, because power can only be taken. It can't be given. James Baldwin said that. We don't empower them. We elevate them to where they need to be, and they see it in themselves, and then they begin to become advocates, and we teach them advocacy, teach them the leadership skills.
You know, come up. I do have something I want to ask. I don't know what you're gonna answer this or not, because that's a wonderful program, I guess, wonderful concept that the school system has for Newport News. I appreciate that. I have not heard that level of intensity when it comes to child's education in recent years. I would say that. So I'm wondering how much money per student is being spent on each child that you hope to attain, you know, the kind of educational level they want before they leave. And I know some places, you know, for example, I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the state of North Carolina has one of the lowest per student funding than anywhere in the nation. And so I'm just wondering, Newport News is a city, not a state, but I'm just wondering do you have any idea of what's been spent on? Because the resources are going to have to come to do this, right, to make sure students we have these outcomes.
Well, and that's what the community partnership is about. I will not stand here before you today and act as if I can speak on behalf of Mrs. Mary Lou Rousseau. She's our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Support Services. That would be a question that is more along the lines of her expertise. Right. While I do look at those numbers and those trends, that is not my function. But what I will say is that when you're looking at allocation of resources, even within the budget that we have, how do we look at that through the lens of a needs-based by school? So we have, in our work that we do, we have what is called a student support team process. So my son's name is Jace Gerald. I will use him as, this is not a real Newport News student. This is my son, so I can say things about him. So Jace Gerald, we noticed that he's in 2nd grade and he's not reading on grade level. There's a student support team process that is driven by his output in school, and they're pulled together the school counselor, the teacher, the parent, any resource people around that are working with my child. And we have a conversation about what supports the school division believes he needs. And I rely on their expertise because I was a high school person. So if you tell me my baby can't read, it's not a whole lot I can do to help to him. I can read to him, but when you're trying to pronounce the, and you keep saying to he, I'm as a math person. I can teach you how to do math. I'm gonna rely on the experts to help with reading. So when we're looking at the student support team process, that is how we identify what the student's needs are. But how do you bring it up a level from the student level to the school level? Well, we have what is called a school support team process that is run through school leadership, where there's data that is evaluated on a quarterly basis, and there's tiers to schools, and the team goes in, the division leadership team goes in with that building principal and their leadership team to talk about what is needed at that school in particular. So then the resources begin to be funneled in. Carver Elementary is a wonderful example. Resources were put in around mathematics, and they made significant gains in 1 year around mathematics. So that is what the process looks like. So it is about what resource funding, and we partner, Mary Lou Mrs. Rousseau can answer that question, but how do we partner with our community, but also how do we communicate what is really going on and the successes we're seeing? One of the things that we really like to focus on is that no school in Newport News Public Schools is not accredited. I know that y'all have heard that we have schools that are not accredited, so I'm gonna say it one more time for the people in the back. We do not have any schools that are not accredited. The accreditation rating system changed in 2017-18, and there are 3 levels: accredited, accredited with conditions, and accreditation denied. No school in Newport News is in accreditation denied. It's either accredited or accredited with conditions. And the evidence that we have in our data shows that even our schools that are accredited with condition are making progress. And it's through the supports we're putting in place. So when you think about the child level, Jace Gerald is a student support team process, but when you pull it back out, our principal at Jace's school might need additional support in that building because many children are struggling. So how do we pull that and provide that same differentiated support to our schools?
Awesome, awesome, thank you.
So the one thing you take away today, tell a friend. No schools in Newport News Public Schools are not accredited. They're either accredited or accredited with conditions. And we did some of that work as well with communicating that information with City Council and making sure that we are just trying to be very educational, not just for our students, but how do we partner with our community to provide insight on some of the jargon that we speak sometimes. Like, we can say accreditation, but what does that really mean? And then when you have a perception like, oh, they're not accredited. No, that's not true. We have 0 schools in Newport News Public Schools that are in accreditation denied.
Okay, you want to give some final comments before you?
I appreciate the opportunity, and I love my degree's in math, so I love data analytics and things like that, but I just really want to ensure that our community understands that our new strategic plan really is focused over the next 5 years on ensuring the outcomes that we all want to see for each of our students. And that is not only done by the work that we do within our buildings, it is in the partnerships that we create in our community and the communication lines that we open so that we can continue a two-way dialogue about what we are seeing in the community and what is needed, versus sometimes we like to say, oh, well, I know best because I'm over here, and you know best because you're over there. No, how are we sitting at the same table to speak the same language and ensuring that we're using a common understanding of what education is and what success looks like in Newport News Public Schools? It's not about what Shamika Gerald thinks success is. It's about what our city defines success is. And so opportunities like this are great for us to begin to open what that dialogue can be so that it benefits our learners.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. What a great presentation, and I'm pretty sure our social media audience appreciated the effort that you brought, and I just want to thank you personally for the wealth of information that you shared with us tonight, and where your research is taking you, and how you're able to articulate with aplomb the kind of things that we're looking for. I really appreciate it. Reverend Egan is going to come and introduce our next guest. He is our presenter for the night.
At this time, we will have Mr. Philip Jones of Bain and Company that will come and talk to us tonight about economic equity and justice, okay? All right, Mr. Jones.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for that warm introduction. It's hard to follow the educator, but I will do my best. My name is Philip Jones. I was not born in Newport News. I was born in Okinawa, Japan. My parents were both military, but I grew up in Newport News. I actually went to high school over in Hampton Christian, so the education is close to my heart. Tonight, I'm really here to speak about economic justice. There's been a lot of things in the news, COVID related, about, there's a quote about if Wall Street gets a cold, then the black community gets the flu, right? So what does that actually mean? That means that if something happens in the economy, it's going to hurt our community the most. If you listen to the news in the last week, President Biden recently enacted or discussed his Tulsa plan. And I'm not going to get into Black Wall Street or the massacre that occurred, essentially 100 years ago. But the president has said he's going to be at the forefront of his mind on how we can decrease the racial wealth gap. What do I mean when I say the racial wealth gap? If we were all here in person, I could read your body language and I could, assess if people know what that means. So when I say the racial wealth gap, I mean disparities in income or assets that are different across races and different social classes. There was an article that was written, I believe, in the Boston Globe a few months ago. It said that the median, right, so median being like, in the middle of the numbers, ranking it ascending or descending, but the median income of black people in Boston was $8, net worth, $8, while the median net worth of a white individual in Boston was over 200,000. So I did not, those numbers are correct, right? So this is for individuals in Boston, and I'm going to cover Virginia. But $8 was the median net worth of a black individual in the city of Boston, while at the same time, 200,000 was essentially the median income or the median net worth of a white individual in Boston. Now, in Virginia, the disparities aren't that great, but I just looked at the last reports, and essentially whites own almost 10 times more than black individuals. And there's been a lot of data about, okay, a black family has this, a white family has this. Everyone can read all of the data and all of the history behind it. But I'm here to talk about 4 things that we can do as a community to uplift our people. Because we all know, salvation is not going to come from the government, right? Someone told me a joke that the worst thing that you can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Right? That's probably not going to work out too well. So I'm here to offer you quickly 4 tangible things that we can do as a community to reduce or to decrease what I'll call the racial wealth gap. So before I entered business, I used to be in the Marine Corps. So I spent about 9 years in the military. And my drill instructor always said, keep it simple, keep it sweet. So I'm going to talk about 4 different things, all right? So bear with me. Number 1 is going to be financial literacy. And I understand that the church is going to put on a financial literacy workshop in the future, so I'm not going to deep dive into this one. But what do I mean when I say financial literacy? That means as a community, we understand how we can use our money to work for us. There's a lot of capital or financial institutions out there in America. However, we have to develop our own means of capital and our own means of production. So the first thing that I want our community members to understand is how money works, right? So that means avoiding payday lenders. That means investing in stocks and bonds. That means developing a mentality of, yes, I can buy this expensive car at 20% APR, but I probably can't afford that, right? Pastor, I would love to drive Jaguar XF. I can't afford it. Not yet, right? And so I think as a community, we have to look about the mentality of, can I have it now or can I have it later? I call that delayed gratification. I think we need to focus on delayed gratification when it comes to our finances. Additionally, under the financial literacy umbrella, I think we need to tell our children at an early age the power of a dollar, how compounded interest works. I do not have a PhD in business, so I'm not going to, talk about CAGR or percentages, but I will tell you this. It is a well-proven fact that the stock market returns about 7% interest every single year, right? That means some years are going to be, 20%, some are going to be 4%, but if you look at the aggregate, over the last 50 years, the stock market returns 7%. That means if I am 18 and I put $1,000, $2,000, when I'm ready to retire, and I'm 50 or I'm 60, that $1,000 can be almost $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, right? So financial literacy is not hard to understand, but someone has to teach, right? Someone has to understand that. And the last thing I'll say on financial literacy is, if you think that there's not an issue in the Black community with financial literacy, then I would ask you to look about, I love my churches. I think it's very important. How many churches do you think we have in Newport News, do you think? So we'll say, 500 churches in Newport News. How many Black banks are in Newport News? 0, right? This is probably something as a community that we can develop and figure out, how can we develop Black banks? How can we develop our own means of production? And how can we use those dollars and that capital to help our community and invest in our school system? So that's number one, right? Like I said, I'm a Marine, so we'll do 4 things. Number 1 is financial literacy. Number 2 is we need to take that capital that we have and we need to invest in education. Notably, we should invest in what's called STEM education, right? That's science, technology, engineering, and math. Studies have shown that as we look about the different jobs that are going to happen in our children's lifetime, the majority of those are probably going to be in the STEM field. There's an organization that I love to volunteer for, and it's called Black Girls Code, or Black Girl Ventures, introducing Black women into the field of STEM and coding. If you look at, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, all of these companies, they're going to need workers, and the workers of the future are going to be individuals that have been taught STEM. When I went to undergrad, I went to the United States Naval Academy. I was blessed to go there. I was an engineering background, general engineering. Now, does that mean that I use engineering in my day-to-day? No, but I do believe that that investment into STEM is one way that as a community, we can reduce that racial wealth gap. That can mean more doctors, more teachers, more engineers, math, science. There's a movie, Hidden Figures, right? That's all important. If we want to have more individuals like that, that's right there in Hampton, then as a community, we have to use our capital, use our resources, and we have to develop our ability to ensure that the workers of the future, our children, are going to be people that have been well-versed in STEM. So once again, number 1 was financial literacy. Number 2 is we need to invest in our school system, and notably, we need to invest in STEM. And the reason I say invest in STEM is because you can look at the studies that show how much money you are going to make over a 20-year career if you have a high school diploma, if you have an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's. We need to ensure that all of our kids, I'll call it, are on a pathway to the middle class. That doesn't have to involve college, right? That can do upskilling, that can be reskilling, that can be certifications, or that can be college. Either way, there has to be a pathway for our kids to be on that middle path. And usually that pathway is going to be well steeped in STEM. That's science, technology, engineering, and that math field. Number 3, the third thing that we can do to decrease the racial wealth gap is we need to buy homes. That is one of the, that's one of the most, of all the assets. So you have, gold, and you have copper, you have commodities, you have cars. The thing that appreciates the most is going to be a house, right? So if you bought a house in Newport News 10 or 20 years ago, that house is probably going to be almost double right now. Due to redlining and some existing conditions that prevented black individuals and people of color of actually owning homes, that prevented us from buying homes and from having that wealth accumulate over time. So I tell everyone, if you can afford it, buy a home. That mortgage is probably going to be less than what you would be paying if you rent it. As a renter, it's extremely hard, and I would say almost impossible, to develop equity, right? So let's say I'm a homeowner, I buy a house for $100,000, it's probably going to appreciate at 5 or 6% every single year. When you rent, you don't have any equity. You're essentially paying someone else's mortgage. And so there's definitely times to rent and times to buy, but if you look at what is the number one thing that makes up an individual's net worth, that's probably going to be the value of their home, all right? So I always tell everyone, when you're able, buy a home. All right, so we're down to the last thing, but I'm going to do a quick recap. Number 1 is financial literacy. Number 2 is investing in our STEM education. Number 3 is home ownership. And number 4 is we need to start our own businesses. We need to control our own means of production. And by that I mean black barbershops, black coffee shops, places where our kids can play, things that help our community. Our people have to own that. I go to I don't go every day, but probably every 3 or 4 days, I go to a black-owned juice bar in City Center. Why do I go there so much? Is it because I like to spend $8 on a kale smoothie? That's not it. But if you want to have a black-owned smoothie shop in Newport News, then you have to support that shop, or else it's going to go away, and it's going to be replaced by another big chain, a Starbucks, a random juice bar. So 1, we need to develop our own businesses in this community, and then 2, we need to support those businesses. Back in Tulsa and other thriving black communities, everything was black-owned. They always say you can vote in different ways. You can vote at the ballots. You can vote this way. The number one way that you can vote is with your dollar. If you choose to patron those establishments, then they're going to grow, they're going to thrive, and they're going to take those dividends and actually contribute back to the community in which they came. So those are really the 4 things that I have: financial literacy, investing in that STEM education, home ownership, and the last thing is creating and investing in black-owned business, especially here in the great city of Newport News. Thank you so much for having me here. This has been a blessing and a real treat, And now I'll turn it over to the audience for any questions, comments, and concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, young man. Appreciate your presentation. And from what I can gather here, quite a few people have enjoyed what you had to say. And I really appreciate it, too. Good research. Now for questions, I guess. Did you pick up any? Okay, so you go have a seat, and now we'll do y'all some softball questions. And,
I used to be a building principal, so
right. Nothing soft, right? But one of the questions that came up for you was that what, if anything, you can talk about in terms of what the school is doing in low-income areas. I think somebody wants to know with your full program and the vision that the city has for the educational programs you put to you tonight. Someone wants to know about students in low-income areas, and what are you? Is there a plan or something like that for people?
well, our plan, like I said before, the strategic plan addresses what each student needs. So not all low-income students need the same thing. So I'll use my son as an example. He is a black male who wears glasses. And we can't generalize black males who wear glasses to say all of them need the same thing. So when we talked about the intersectionality of the different characteristics, our goal is to eliminate the predictability of student outcomes based on those factors. So what are we doing specifically for students in low-income families is not a question that you can answer without talking about specific demographics and characteristics of those children. So it would be unfair to generalize, and I will speak from a place of being a principal in the Southeast End community, to generalize that all schools in the Southeast End need this. Heritage High School was accredited continuously for 3 consecutive years, and we didn't need anything. But if you're going to make a generalization about schools and students in low-income communities, that is not a fair assessment, because it doesn't always boil down to the income in the community. It boils down to the communication of the needs of resources and how are we supporting schools in those areas so that they can make the progress that is necessary. So when we talk about things like financial literacy, that is a state requirement, but how are we doing financial literacy in ways that engage students so that they have a full understanding of how their dollar impacts their actual community? How do we create advocacy and action plans that solve real problems in our community? That's how you address students from where they are, because then they develop the programs and the systems that are going to change those situations. When you talk about wealth development, the reason the system of education was developed way back in the day was in order for it to build education so that you could attain the opportunities to gain more wealth. An upwardly mobile society was the initial intent. Now, whether we get that now or not, the way it was developed and what it was built on is a whole different conversation. But when we talk about students, we don't talk about a generalization such as, what do you do for all, because some schools in low-income communities are thriving. So that generalization wouldn't be a fair assessment. And when you brought up STEM, we talk about what opportunities are available to students. Those opportunities are available to all students in Newport News Public Schools. And if that is an interest area for a student from a specific community, you can apply. It's an open process to be at a school that specializes in STEM, in music, in Warwick High School has the Governor's Health Science. Heritage has Governor's STEM Academy. Denby has the Aviation Academy. When you talked about the jobs of the future, the reports, the World Forum Report on Jobs for 2020 identifies 15 characteristics of the workforce. Our profile of a learner has 7 of the top 15 in it already. We're already rooting the work that we're doing, not in what we think about a community, but what we know our communities are going to need moving forward, and how do we develop our learners so that they can be the business owner of the juice shop, so they have that vision. How do we teach them to be an entrepreneur? How do we teach them this skill set? STEM is absolutely the way of the future, but our students are shooting for jobs that have not even been created. We can't even fathom in our mind the job that my son will have, and he's 7. How old are you, baby? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You're 18. 10 years from now, the job that you work, we might be sitting back looking at you like, they ain't even had that. We ain't even think about that. But are we preparing students who are flexible? You talked about reskilling. That's in the report. Like, how are you able to be reskilled? Well, you're a self-reflective learner. So the R is for resilience and reflection. How are we teaching the soft skills? Because it's no longer just about reading, writing, arithmetic. That's the old school way, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. It's about how do we teach you to be adaptable into a world that is ever changing and in a global workforce. So yes, we want you to contribute to Newport News, absolutely. But if you choose to go somewhere else, you better make us proud and you better represent us because you have the skills to be a leader because we instilled that in you. So it's not about what we do for individual subsets. It's really about taking a holistic approach to the child.
That's a great answer. I appreciate the explanation that you gave as well. You have a question?
Yes, I know you talked about STEM, and I know that Heritage is the STEM school.
It's one of them. And I'm glad you brought that up. I know that Newport News has a great program, as you said, that each one of the schools has different paths. For those kids who cannot get into Heritage for whatever reason because of the magnet program, do other schools offer those opportunities to learn about coding maybe as an elective or something like that in their class where they can maybe practice an engineering or robotics class in their individual schools, even if they can't get into Heritage? Well, there are opportunities across our city for students to engage in things like the Engineering Design Challenge. You don't have to be at a STEM school to do that. There is also the work around what does technology, so our career and technical education courses are centered around skills that are needed for the actual workforce. So you get a credential that is applicable in the real world as you go through your education. So when you think about Microsoft package itself, right? And you have Word, PowerPoint, all of those things. Our students are actually earning credentials in these software packages that are applicable in the workforce. And so I do not have, I'm ashamed to say it in front of people though, I do not have an industry certification in PowerPoint, Word, Excel. Like, I know how to work it and I could probably get one, but I have a student, if we're applying for the same job and they have a credential that says they're certified and I do not, they're going to get the job because they have the certification from the company that's, now I can be good at it all I want, but that certification speaks volumes. Now, I mean, I am a bit older and I do have a different type of degree, but when we're talking about level playing fields, how are we preparing our students to be highly competitive in a workforce that is changing, but also credentialing them? So when we talk about STEM, it is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I will say that I have heard STEAM, where you add the arts in there, because the arts is very, if you don't know, I'm a mathematician by trade, I will say that, I will go there. My degree is in applied mathematics. There is no arts without mathematics. So arts are a STEM field, and the connection between the two has to be very clear. Just because I want to be a fashion designer doesn't mean I'm not in STEM. I want to be a singer. Why do the notes sound good? Why is this painting beautiful? There are all of these concepts that we can pull together across STEM or STEAM, but really it's about rooting into what our students are interested in learning about.
Sounds great. For young presenter again, and I'm assuming that two are millennials and one is, what do they call you now, Gen X or? Yeah, Gen Xer.
I don't think I'm a millennial. I'm not a millennial. I might look like one, but I'm not.
Okay.
Oh wait, maybe I am. What are you?
I'm 31. I get back spasms. I'm old. You know?
So
I think I'm a millennial. I think so.
Yeah,
I was born in '89.
I'm before them. Yeah, yeah. I appreciate it though. I appreciate that you thought I was there.
So we'll still put you in classification for the night.
Thank you.
One of the questions come up about, can you shortly sketch out, give some pointers on developing a short-term, long-term financial plan for people who might want to follow these 4 steps that you have in mind?
So the first thing that I would say is I would definitely talk to a certified financial planner That being said, I think any program that you're going to find from a CFP or on Google is probably going to have some key tenets, and I can go over 4 or 5 of those. Number one, everyone is going to tell you to reduce your credit card debt, school debt, etc. Right? So those loans you're probably paying off are 20% APR, 15% APR. Studies will say pay off like the one that has the largest APR because you're only paying off the interest. You're never actually paying off the principal. So I would say try to reduce the amount of debt that you have. Number two, I would try to have a strategic plan. And by that I mean, I'm 31. I want to retire when I am 60 or 65. So I'm going to work for 30 years. So I'm probably going to need a certain amount of money set aside for retirement. Okay? So not to get too into the weeds, but we have usually a 401k, an IRA, or a 403b, I believe. Regardless, there are many different avenues to conserve your wealth for retirement, but you have to invest. And once again, if I invest $100 this year, when I'm 65, that $100 is probably going to be, I can't do the math in my head, but we'll just say $1,200, right? So one, going back, I would reduce our debt. Number two, I would start to invest into retirement, and it's never too early to invest into retirement. Once again, you can Google the time value of money, but if my friend right here puts $100 into the market, by the time he's 65, that money will have compounded and compounded and compounded, and it's going to be outrageous. So the earlier you can start, the better. And then number three is I would probably develop a budget. So I have a budget for myself, and in that budget, I try to live within my means. Would I love to go to Jamaica for 6 months? Yes, but I can't afford that, right? So by having a budget, I check in every 30, 60, and 90 days, and I can say, okay, I'm paying off my student loans. I have a car payment that is well within my means. I'm making sure I tithe, which is important, right? I have all these things in my budget, and I try to live beyond my means. So there's probably like multiple things to talk about, but I think if you want to cover the 80% of it, it's reduce your debt, invest for retirement, and use a budget to live within your means. And there are free financial tools online that can help you do this.
Okay, so as a follow-up,
Yep.
you mentioned the debt ratio, but how about millennials who are dealing with student debt? I mean, or college debt, loans they had to take out. You know, in Congress already, they're talking about eliminating those who have those high-paying loans that you talked about. And there's some other discussion that's going on. The president may be kind of wiping out the debt, but it hasn't been wiped out yet. So what do you suggest for students who are not students now, I mean graduates who are in the workforce and having to pay half of their salary to a student loan?
I think that's a valid question. I would also say that's a little bit of the chicken or the egg question. And by that I mean, I don't want to get into it, but like sometimes there are programs that our children go to where the ROI is not worth that degree. There are certain times where that happens where I'll give a very broad example. You go to an out-of-state college and you drop $200,000 for a bachelor of something that is very media, where it's like it's very hard to just move to LA and break into like the film industry, right? So just because you drop $200,000 on a media degree doesn't mean you're going to have a job immediately. So that's like a whole separate issue. I think as a community, we can do better channeling our kids into things that have a high ROI, which is like a larger problem than just Newport News. So that's like the first thing. The second thing I would say is I'm personally a fan of smaller government. I'm a fan of like community involvement and growing the community and less reliance on the federal government. So people can say what they want. I do not think that they're going to cancel out debt entirely. I don't think that works with like our GDP and it's not feasible. So if I was a young student and I have a sister, born in Japan but raised in Newport News, went to Hampton schools, went to college in New York, and she's now a reporter for CBS News. She's 23 or 24. She has student debt. So this is and I helped her move into an apartment 2 weeks ago. So this is something that's like very top of mind for me. And I'll tell the viewers what I told her is there's never a wrong time to start investing for retirement. She wants to live her New York City life. She wants the lifestyle. I'm like, you should be investing in your 401k right now because that money is going to compound, okay? So I know that it's hard. I know people have a lot of student debt, and I think my advice from before still rings true. Reduce the debt as much as you can. Try to maximize your ROI on other jobs, and try to live beneath your means, right? So just because you can afford to live by yourself, I had roommates up until like 2 years ago, right? Like you can probably get another roommate, and there are ways to make sure you live beneath your means, is what I would say.
Okay, very very quickly, follow up with that.
Well, let me.
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I would also like to, when we talk about student loan debt, I have student loan debt, but I also started my academic career at the community college. And I think there is a lot of discounting of the community college experience because you can get a quality education at a very reasonable price. And in Virginia, the articulation agreements or the transfer terms, often you can take those. I went to Tidewater Community College in Virginia Beach. I got my associates, and I transferred all of my credits to Old Dominion University. So I went to Old Dominion for 2 years and got a degree in applied mathematics, minor in education. I then was able to go into the teaching field. I don't know about the return on investment on that because at Teachers about 20 years ago, we were making about $12 a year. But when you think about options and opportunities as we're transitioning our students into college, or even like me, I took a break after high school. I didn't go straight to college. I was out of school for 4 years, and I entered in through the community college system, and it does not stop you from being successful, right? I have a bachelor's degree from Old Dominion, a master's degree from Regent University, and a doctoral degree from Virginia Tech. It does not change your trajectory. What it can do is set you up for success long term, because if you have a rate of tuition that you can afford and pay, or maybe a work-study program or something like that, then that automatically reduces some of that long-term debt that you may build upon. Because, sometimes it takes degrees to get to where you need to be. In education, that's one of those places.
Good. So you weren't suggesting that the career choices that people make in college or the majors that they take, STEM versus liberal arts, should be rethought when it comes to job, careers, outside of college and being able to pay off your student loan. Because, for example, technology, engineering, mathematics, and science, as you say, usually pay a lot more money than those liberal arts degrees do. In some cases, not always. But the way you gave the answer is that you may be suggesting that the degree choice, like a communications major, you could spend $200,000 getting a journalism degree, and you could make, $15 an hour when you get out. And of course, a lot of your money is going to be lost into paying off student debt. So, is that what you're trying? Did you suggest that, or am I misreading what you're saying?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I can restate my thesis.
What the question is, are you suggesting that people should do STEM degrees, right, as opposed to liberal arts degrees, in an effort to pay off their student loans a lot quicker?
Yeah, so what I would say is I encourage people to pursue their passions, pursue your dreams and your loves. I think college is an investment into your future, and I think different profiles have different ROIs. And so for my sister, who wanted to break into being in the news industry and to be a reporter, she understood that, okay, if I want to be a New York City reporter, it's probably going to take me 4 to 5 years to break into that. So I'm going to pursue this liberal arts degree, but I know that it's going to be probably a little hard. I'm probably going to have to work a few other jobs to break into it. So I am not saying STEM is the future. You have to go to STEM. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I think we have to go into these things eyes wide open, because I think student debt has the ability to become a ball and chain for many years, especially if we're not informed. And I think, how do I say this? I think we want the education system to be the answer to everything, but sometimes as a community or as like an individual family, it's too much to say, school system, tell my kids where to go. Like, there's the ratio of guidance counselors. It's just, that's not going to work. They are there to help. They are the professionals. But as a community, I think we can come together and provide guidance and say, hey, I'm a businessman. I own a juice bar. You want to be my intern this summer, and I'll pay you, and I'll show you how it's done. I think we should honestly revert somewhat back to the apprenticeship model, where you want to own your car shop, you want to be a pastor, let me help you, let me guide you, let me mentor you. I think that's probably more of the right answer. That way you go into things eyes wide open.
Well, and the Virginia Department of Education is moving in that direction with the College Career Civic Readiness Indicator, which is a part of accreditation. So an apprenticeship counts towards accreditation for a student. So if I am interested in owning a juice bar or entrepreneurship, and I get an internship, and we can, we got to certify the number of hours and make sure you met these standards, the Virginia Department of Education is investing in ensuring that we have our students prepared to serve their communities, and that's how we get them to understand what their career fields could be. Now, we can say STEM will pay you, but my degree is in mathematics. Like, I have a pure math degree. I could have been an actuary making over $100,000 a year straight out of college, but I chose my passion, which was education. And do I regret that choice? No. Do I have student loan debt? Absolutely. But what it is, and I know what you're saying, it's like you pick the passion, but also understanding that if you're going into it just for the money, that the investment that you're making has to match where you're going, and you have to just be educated about the decisions that you're making and not be naive enough to think, well, I went to Brown University, I did all these years, I got my law degree, now I'm going to be Olivia Pope, or I'm going to be the lady on Scandal. I can't remember what they used to call it. But I'm going to be big time lawyer out here making all this money. That's not how it works. Shadowing the Commonwealth attorney, Howard Gwynn, shadowing his attorneys and seeing what the work looks like every day, because it's a grind. I think that is what is missing sometimes too, is the education and how the community supports the school in that way. So I'm glad you brought that point up. But I do want to do one thing. Baby, you've been sitting up here.
Yeah.
What resonates with you? Because it's about you.
Yeah, we're going to
what resonates with you, because that's what I want to hear, because I want to take some notes so I can take it back.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald and Mr. Jones, and I'm glad you brought that up to Mr. Ingram up there. What do you see that Newport News Public Schools could do differently to prepare you for your future career path? I know you discussed that you want to go into social work. What kind of program do you feel Newport News could have implemented in the school system to help students like you who want to go in those career fields of service to help others?
So I would say that, well, my experience with Newport News Public Schools has been very unique. I would say, and I have had this conversation with many people, it has to be more classes on what we want to do in life. So it needs to be classes on business and owning a business. I know we teach economics, and that's supposed to be a requirement, and career and technical education, that's supposed to be a requirement too. But having classes on like owning a business, having classes on entrepreneurship, having classes on social work, even having classes on teaching. Sitting down with my guidance counselor last year, she told me if I wanted to be a teacher, she said, well, it's only like you have to have so many number of people to be in that class to have that as a class, and nobody signed up for the class. So seeing that nobody really can get into those classes because they're not being talked about or they're not being advertised like that, it has to be more of those classes and seeing the interest in the students. So asking the students, hey, what do you want to be, what you want to grow up? What path are you looking at? And helping them in that 4-year gap. And then if they say, oh, maybe this is not what I want to do, so I'm not going to college and I'm not wasting money on a degree that I'm not going to be happy in at the end of the day. I would say more classes catering to who we are and more examination and having people come in and asking, hey, like we're going to give you like a survey or something. Tell me what you want to do. Do you want to do shadow internships with this person, shadow internships with this person, or what? But it has to be more of a conversation with the students instead of just having these classes that we're not really going to need at the end of the day.
Okay. Sounds good. I have another question for you, Doctor. Someone mentioned or wanted to get an explanation about the, if I can find it again. I had it, I got to find it. But I think it had to do with the level of teachers necessary in order to obtain the kind of outcomes that you guys are looking for. I mean, I think that's what they were alluding to. I'm not sure how you can answer that, but I think the recruiting of teachers with that mindset. I think some teachers come in with their own programs, the way they want to do things, and they've been taught that way or learned it or whatever situation may be. But I think somebody wants to know how the recruiting adds up to the level of outcomes that you are looking for.
Well, what I can say is when we go out and recruit teachers, we always look for highly qualified teachers, and we have our human resources department. Stephanie Hotz is the director of that program, and they go out intentionally to historically black colleges and universities to recruit and try to retain teachers of color. Dr. Claudia Hines, our school counseling director, has the male mentorship, the minority male mentorship program for African American males who are in our division working with our students. But when we talk about how do you shift mindsets of teachers in our school division, that's the work of the school division, but that's also the work of the community as well. Because we have to be willing to engage in conversations like this with our students so that they can tell us what they need. Because I can go back and say, he said that classes we want about what we want to do in life, entrepreneurship, teaching, career paths. There was an allocation issue where he wanted to do probably teachers for tomorrow and he couldn't get in there because there weren't. But to have the students at the table having the conversation with the decision makers, but not just the decision makers in the school division, because sometimes that community partnership, that allyship that we have with our community, you are the best advocate for us. So sometimes we get tired of, we can't say what we really want to say because of the position that we're in as the school division, but the community can rally behind certain things that they feel like we need as a school division to provide support for our learners. Because for you to say asking students what they want, survey, student voice, those are the things that even when we talk about educational equity, why is Mr. Ingram sitting right here saying, I wish we had in entrepreneurship, when entrepreneurship is a course that we offer. Right. But is it because we don't have the resources to support it? Well, that's a question that we need to engage with in our community and really figure out. Maybe it's not the traditional entrepreneurship because there is a funding model. Maybe it is we connect him with a business partner to have a master class, have you working with someone that if that's what you express, how do we better connect the dots between the school division, the local workforce, and our community partners? Because I don't want to devalue, I don't want to sit here and say that only the workforce is valuable to our school division either. Because the people in our community that are retired, that carry the history of our city, are valuable to our students as well, because they are the ones that teach that legacy of where we were and where we are going now. And then you can talk about, well, what was it like to start your business? Or what challenges did you face? Because now I have this opportunity, how do I maximize on it? So I think that how do we address stuff like allocations, or how do we get enough teachers to do what we need to do? That is where community partnership comes in, and that transparency in the work comes in. It comes in a place of saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working with, this is how we're providing resources to students, educating our community, and then it's for the community to say, you know what, you brought it up, right? You said, what is the community gonna do to support education as well? Because it's a reciprocal relationship. It's not a take, 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 give, give, give. We have to work in tandem to reciprocate. So I can't answer the question about how do we get more teachers, but it's about how do we change mindsets of the workforce that we have, and that's through professional learning. And what are our beliefs? Our beliefs are clearly outlined in our strategic plan. So that is the way that we shift mindsets, but retaining and recruiting is a priority, and it's identified there as well.
Outstanding, outstanding.
All right, I have a question from one of the members. It says, what can the community do to ensure that there is a community school in the East End so kids don't have to be bussed out of their neighborhoods and still get a great education?
That question is outside of my area of expertise. I will not, I can't even speak to it. I know that I worked in the community, but I can't speak to what exactly it is that can be done to create that in the community. I do think that that is more of a conversation that a group of people have, and you have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions, because it's kind of hard to ask clarifying questions like, what do you mean by a neighborhood school when there are schools in the community? Like, what exactly are you talking about? So I will not answer that question.
All right, we're going to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes, but I did have one incoming question again for you. Adjustments. What adjustments have you made to your strategic plan in light of the required virtual learning for the first 14 months?
Well, I will say we actually sat down and looked at our strategic plan, and where you would think something like a school closure or a school shutdown would stifle a strategic plan, we have really accelerated some areas, like the one-to-one device initiative and making sure our students have access to internet, our blended learning. It's called the digital transformation. If you look under stewardship of resources in Goal 5, the digital transformation is in there. We have accelerated digital transformation, our pre-K-12 literacy plan development, blended learning professional development. We've gotten innovative ways to recruit and retain staff through, like, I believe that there are some people out there that are watching this on Facebook Live that would have never watched it on Facebook Live if the pandemic would have happened. Right. There are a lot of people who would have never even imagined using Zoom unless the pandemic occurred. So when you think about a strategic plan, it's not about looking at it through a lens of deficit. What did we miss? We look at our strategic plan through what we gained. And what we gained was traction in areas that, unless this happened, we wouldn't have necessarily gone one-to-one in 3 months. Chris Jenkins, our technology director, in a few months, every student who needed a device had one in their hands. That would have not happened without the pandemic. Blended learning, and what school did you go to, baby? So Woodside is the sister school for Heritage, right? Heritage is one-to-one, Woodside was not. But they're one-to-one now. They're using Canvas, and they're using these blended learning platforms. It accelerated things that are helping our students, because in order to be a functioning college student, in college, they're not doing the regular old come in, check your name on the board. Like, they're online blended learning classes. So students are better prepared to engage in that world because we had this pandemic. So I just want to be clear that there are things on our strategic plan that we might not have, we thought that would be a low-hanging fruit, an easy win, but we have accelerated in some of the most challenging areas that other school divisions, like our technology work is unparalleled with school divisions who are not already one-to-one. To be able to distribute and have the foresight to order the devices in advance while everybody was waiting, our kids already had them. So when we think about the strategic plan, the adjustments that we're making are revising what those metrics look like because we have accomplished so much during this time. The social emotional learning curriculum implementation, and how are we distributing those resources? Dr. Mitchell and the student advancement team have done phenomenal work to engage families by knocking on doors, but how are we using Zoom and other technologies? How are we deploying the mental health services that our students need during a pandemic, but also thinking about what we do when we get back? So we haven't made any distinct changes. What we have done is just evaluated how far we've come, and then just really figuring out what that looks like as we continue to move forward.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought up the mental health piece because that was going to be my next question. For you, Mr. Ingram, in light of Newport News being out, because of the pandemic, we've seen a rise in mental health issues with a lot of students during this time. Tell me how has that impacted you, your fellow classmates, or people you may have known and during this time, during this pandemic season, as far as your educational learning?
I would say mental health has been a huge impact on a bunch of students this year, because we quickly had to adapt to virtual learning. So we were literally in school March 13th, out for 2 weeks, and then we literally had to adapt to being virtual. So it was like we didn't get a time in between like courses or anything. It was like you have to adapt to being at home all the time. You have to adapt to seeing your family. You have to adapt to seeing your siblings, and you have to adapt to being isolated in a house. And so it really did play an effect on a lot of people. It brought a lot of people's relationship, and it bettered some people, but it made some people worse at the end of the day. And I feel like we could have had more contact with our counselors, and our guidance counselors could have checked up on us more. Our principals could have did more during that time. But I get we were trying to figure out what we were doing in that time because it was just a quick turnaround. But it has affected a lot of people's mental health. For me, it was like I had to take time to step back and see what really was going on. I had to better myself, and it helped me, like Dr. Gerald said, it helped us become more independent, especially for our seniors, juniors last year. We literally were like, oh, this is a great step into if we want to go to college, how we are going to be on our own and how we are going to be left. So dealing with that mental health aspect at the end of the day too also showed us how are you going to be in college. You're independent now. You're left alone now. Nobody's going to be checking up on you every day. Nobody's going to be telling you, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to get on it. So it was like we were on our own, but we made it through at the end of the day because we all had each other's back. And so I feel like having a great sense of community behind you at the end of the day, and showing and people seeing who their real true friends and their relationships that they have at the end of the day made people better in their mental health and help people become who they are today.
Ms. Gerald, quick question. I'm glad he said that. But for those kids who didn't have the support group like Jay said he had, Mr. Ingram said he had, what was Newport News' response or plan for those kids who didn't have that support group or that network that they could reach out to that could be there for them during this time?
Now, I will not pretend to be able to know all the wonderful things that Dr. Michelle Mitchell and her team did in student advancement, but I do know that they increased the number of therapists that were working with our licensed clinical social workers. But in addition to that work, what I would like to share one thing and then ask you a question, because I think it's important, is that when we talk about the learning that happened when the pandemic, because on March, now I will never forget this, March 13th we got out. March 23rd at 1:04 p.m., the governor closed schools for the rest of the year. I will not forget that, ever. Because as a building principal, I'm standing in my living room going into emergency learning mode, which is what we have been in as a school division. Students were transitioned to emergency learning. Teachers were transitioned to emergency teaching. And parents were, my son, I was transitioned to emergency elementary school teacher. I was never prepared for that in anything that I have ever done. But we're all transitioning in this emergency learning environment and doing what we can as quickly as possible to service all of our students. So that is what I wanted to say. Like, we were in this thing together, because if you're not a person that knows technology, to be thrust into a digital world immediately is a big transition, not only for students, but you know, some folks couldn't even use a smartboard sometimes. You smiling because you know. You smiling because you know. But when you think about because I know you're graduating, if you were to return next year, what would you need to return? What do you think you would need, or your peers would need, to return next year and fully engage in school after you've been so independent for over 14 months, like in pandemic learning? Because I'm going to write it down and take it back.
That's kind of hard to say, because I know I would have preferred virtual. Like, I would have preferred to do it on my own. I would have preferred to stick, like, because I was doing my work ahead of time, so it's easier for me because I trained myself to discipline.
I need you to train my son.
Yeah, I had to sit down and be like, okay, if I do all my work this day, then I don't have to worry about it that day. I get it done for the week. So I would say more of like a sense of independent, like it was, but not too much on the kids. I would say giving them that chance to have Canvas and have the chance, like, all your work needs to be turned in by this day, but like it's still independent. The teacher's still teaching, but it's still a little pushback and more on the kids' parts to help them become better and help them become more independent. Especially in high school, I feel like that should be more. Middle school, it can be more of the teacher on the kids and making sure the kids are doing what they're doing. But high school, maybe a little more independent and a little more, I gotta help you prepare for what's gonna come in these next years and what you're about to step out into. Especially for the seniors, it should be a lot of independence, and you need to be on it. You gotta be doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And that's an interesting point that comes out of this, because without emergency learning, the way that we did it, how would we ever identify students who would thrive in a virtual learning environment, right? Because otherwise, you would have still been doing now you would have had all your senior activities.
Yeah.
But you would have still been learning in a way that may not have necessarily prepared you in the way that this has. And I haven't heard it articulated that way. Like, when you move out of your parents' home and go to college, you are independent. You have to learn how to do your work on your own. And I feel like y'all set me up, because y'all got me up here with the Naval Academy. He likes virtual learning, and I almost didn't graduate high school, but I'm here today. So I just want to let you know, for parents out there that's struggling with their high school daughters that are like, you want to wring their neck, just know we're in the church house, don't do that. But I will tell you that it takes all types of students to make an education system work, and how do we honor and value that? So I haven't heard it articulated quite like that. So thank you, I'm going to take that back, but also too, knowing that there has to be some flexibility in the work. We can't go back to the way that it used to be, because it wasn't working for everybody, but also how do we take these learned experiences? So thank you so much for that.
Okay, Mr. Jones, you got the last question. I'm going to do rich dad, poor dad on you. So if I had to invest in one thing between housing and stocks, what would you advise me to do?
So that's a little bit of a trick question, because you didn't clarify the amount of money that you have.
No, I did.
But I think studies would say that you should probably invest, the debt first, but after the debt, I would invest into your retirement account, because that has certain tax shields, and that money will multiply faster. I think the house, you have to have, closing costs and the down payment on a few other things. So I think studies would say that maximize your retirement account, because there's some tax implications and some benefits that you will reap in your older age.
Yeah, and also with the house, you have expenses once you get it. That kind of takes away from a lot of your income at the same time. So.
Yeah, I think that the final answer is it's a balanced portfolio, and it's diversifying your assets across different management classes. But the retirement account has tax implications, and I would definitely throw my money toward that first.
Okay, so as we get ready to close, since you already have the mic, I want you to just tell the audience a little bit about you and where they need contact information or something like that with you. Just let them know.
Sounds good. once again, Philip Jones, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I live in Port Warwick, which is only 10 minutes away from here. But if you need to contact me, you can find me on Twitter or Facebook. Just my Facebook is my name, Philip Jones, and then my Twitter is Phil Jones 757. Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a blessing. Thank you.
Okay. And same with you, Dr. Jerry. We appreciate both of you coming.
Well, you can find me at Newport News Public Schools website. I'm over the Department of Equity Assessment and Strategic Operations. My email address is shamika.gerald@nn.k12.va, all of that good stuff. But I can be found on Twitter at shamika_Gerald. And if you need to reach out or you have questions, I mean, you can contact the school board office. And if you ask your question first, they'll direct you. So if you had questions regarding finance, you wouldn't ask me. But they would be able to direct you into the right place. But also, the ask the superintendent or the comment section on the website actually works. I receive a lot of comments that way. So it does send those out to the appropriate people in the school division as well. Again, I will echo your remarks. It has been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation this evening. And I really appreciate you for your openness and your candidness about your experiences in the school division. And we know great things are coming from you, and we look forward to seeing how you make us in NPS proud.
All right, Mr. Ingram, you have the final word.
All right, my name is Jay Morrow Ingram II. I'm a senior at Woodside High School, so I graduate next Thursday. I'll be attending Virginia Commonwealth University in the fall to major in clinical social work with a minor in psychology. So I'm very excited and I'm very proud of what's about to happen.
Congratulations to you all. Thank you all again for being with us tonight. We're going to shut it down. My Facebook and social media people really appreciate you being here. We appreciate the comments that you gave us. We didn't get all of the questions tonight, but you have the information from these three. You can always check them out and send them a message on their websites and so forth. So we really appreciate everything you've done. I want to thank everybody this week that's been able to help us to make this possible. This is our first annual Social Justice Week. So next year we'll have similar things happening. So we'll continue this. Hopefully the church will be able to continue it for a long time coming. But we thank our guests, our panelists that's been here all week, and certainly want to thank our AV people who had an opportunity to help us. That's Chris and Trayvon. We thank you so much for unmerited favor that you gave us during this week, and certainly thank our deacons who've been here and all who've been here to support us this week as well. So I'm going to let Minister Ingram, I keep calling him minister, he's Reverend Ingram. We're going to let him come and close us out in his own special way. He's been a big help. He helped us get all our flyers together. He made sure these two were here tonight, and he's really been work with us a lot, and so I really appreciate it. He thinks he's big time now that he's a STVU. He's a STVU graduate now, one of the union guys. So you know. But I thank him for everything he's done. God bless you.
Thank you to everyone again for coming out tonight. To all of those who participated this week, Dr. Johnson on Monday with voter suppression, and to Chief Drew who was watching tonight. Lieutenant Morgan, Lieutenant Atkins, Dr. Lorenzo Boyd, and Mark Dozier, who supported us on last night, and then to these great panel tonight. Thank y'all for closing everything out. And to you, First Baptist, this will not be the last. Just be prepared. There's some more topics that me and Pastor Johnson had kicked around in the office. There's a couple of that was on my mind that we couldn't get in this year, but best believe you me, if I'm here next year, you'll get them next year. Amen. Let us close in prayer. Father God, we thank you for this time, dear God, of learning, of study, and gathering information. Now, as we leave this place, dear God, but never from your presence, God, let us go into the valley, dear God, to do the work that you've given us information to do, that we may be a blessing unto our own households, dear God, but unto all those that we come in contact with, that we may share this message, dear God, that we may all grow, and that we will help our community to grow, that we all will be the better for it. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. See y'all all on Sunday.